Thank you for joining us here at FreightWaves for SONAR 201 training. This is Donnie Gilbert. A little background on myself. I've been in the logistics industry for a little bit over 15 years. I've worked with both the asset side and the brokerage side, customer service, dispatch, and also the pricing. So I grew up in the world of spot markets. The majority of the freight that I booked was either pick up same day, or if I was lucky, it picked up the next morning. So I was used to working very close with the spot markets and, of course, finding capacity to cover these loads very, very quickly. Today, we're going to discuss some of the indices here in Sonar that I would have used when looking at different markets and understanding what's going on with the markets across the U.S. We're going to look at outbound tender volumes, inbound tender volumes. We're going to look at the Headhaul Index, which helps us measure capacity. And we're going to look at tender rejection rates. Rejection rates correlate very closely with the movements that are going on in the spot market, where the rates are going up, rates are going down. And this is all relative to the contracted rates in those markets. We break those down by dry van and reefer, and also different lengths of haul. We also will look at tender lead times and wait times in these markets. So let's go ahead and kind of get started here. Let's pull up and start with building a chart here, or building a US map here, and looking at outbound tender volumes. So to build a map, I'm going to click down here on my edit pages, and then I'm going to click here on the blue section that says add a page. I'm going to name it Sonar Map and click add. Now, each time you add a map, it will show up here and it will be blank. And that's because we're about to build a page. You'll go over here to the top right here with the blue box with the plus on it. I will click that, and I will go down and I will look at the maps. As this is bringing up, let's talk about a few things. Up here in the top right-hand corner, we see the question mark with a circle around it. If you click on that, here's our Knowledge Center. Click on Knowledge Center. And down here below is indices by category. Here in the indices by category, we define all the indices that we use in the Sonar system. It would be very wise for everybody to go through these and look at these different indices and read what they're about, why they're important, and of course, also you'll learn the indice code that we use when we're looking at different types of charts. But you scroll down here, and today we're going to be looking at the volumes, market volume insights, tender volumes at first, then Headhaul Index, and then on down here, we'll be looking, past it, at the indices for supply and demand, which is going to be our tender rejection rates. See here, there's the maritime, there's volumes, there's rail intermodal indices, trucking supply and demand. So here we'll be looking at tender rejections, tender lead times. So these are a lot of stuff that's really important when looking to figure out the type of volumes that are going in and out of a market. Is capacity tight, capacity loose, and what carriers are doing. Are they accepting the loads at contracted rates, or are they declining them at contracted rates because rates in the spot markets are higher? So looking back here at our map, this is our Sonar map. You see we have 135 different market types listed out here through our U.S. region. Right here in the middle, you see this little icon. That's a truck, and that's where we want to work out of. We click that to open it, and I'm going to keep it on U.S. maps. I'm going to go ahead and turn our ChlorPlus settings on. And the first thing I'm going to look at, I will click here. I'm going to type in volume. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to look for outbound tender volume index. As I scroll down, we've got rail volumes, outbound tender volume index. So using the US maps here, our outbound tender volume US map index, this right here is a good 30,000 foot elevation, kind of an overview of what is going on in all the markets across the US. Let me turn my legend on here so we can see what's going on. Down here at the bottom now, I will have a legend appear. And um, this indice is set on an index. It does not tell you how many trucks are in the market or how many loads are in the market. We set an index on March 1st. And March 1st was a good neutral market when we started outbound tender volumes. And we set it at 10,000 for the entire national freight market. And then, of course, we took the percentage of market share per each market and we divided that out. And we came up with how much of the index applies to each of these markets. So on March 1st, had you added up all of the markets, they would have added up to 10,000. Of course, those numbers have changed. We've had the outbound tender volumes grow and, of course, shrink. And right now we're around, I believe, around 10,300. So we're above 10,000, like using 10,000 as kind of a benchmark. Um, we want to see freight volumes above 10,000, kind of help us know that we're on the positive side of that. And they'll drop down below 10,000, of course, in the wintertime, first and second quarter. But I always keep a positive attitude. We want to see them above 10,000. So looking here at the map for outbound tender volumes, this really explains to carriers where the freight is. Of course, we got our big six markets. These are the markets that have a lot of rail input into them, and they're the markets that are hubs for different markets across the U.S. We have the southern LA markets or Southern California markets. We got LA and Ontario, California. They're split because Los Angeles represents a lot of the port freight that comes into the port, and we got the warehousing in Ontario, California. Moving over to the east, we got right here in the middle, we've got Dallas and Fort Worth. They're one of the large markets. Up here, kind of in the middle, we have the Memphis market. Just north of that, we've got the Chicago and Joliet markets. Down here in the southeast, we've got Atlanta. And over here in the northeast, we've got Harrisburg, PA. And I call those the big six because, Harrisburg, PA, that's what filters markets through. Those loads filter into the northeast and supply the northeast with freight. Of course, Atlanta is one of the big hubs for the southeast, Dallas for the southwest, LA for the entire western regions, and of course, Chicago is a big hub for sending freight throughout the Midwest. So we look at these maps as you look at the legend down here, you'll notice that the lowest numbers here that are in white, these are smaller markets, and they're colored white. And as we go through these markets, you can see the index down here. The more volumes that are in a market, the darker shades of blue they will receive. So the big markets here that are listed today is the Ontario market. Atlanta there is a darker shade of blue, along with Harrisburg, PA, and New Jersey over there is darkened up to a very deep shade of blue. And when you hover over it, you'll see that the Elizabeth market has 307 index points, which is a fairly big market. I believe Ontario is our largest, and it has 509 index points. LAX is one of the top markets with 338. So right now, the Elizabeth, New Jersey market is almost as big as the LAX market, which gives you some kind of information. Memphis here is 170. So it's about half the size, a little bit less than half the size of our Ontario market. We also have the same maps that we can look at, and we can bring these up in a heat map here. I'm going to close out this map, and I'm going to bring up a tree map. I'm going to name this volumes. I'm going to select my symbol. I'm going to go down to our volume section, market volumes. I'm going to scroll down to outbound tender volume. This is weekly change, 2 weekly change, but I want the actual outbound tender volumes. Yearly change. All right. We'll use market share. That's inbound. They have lost. inbound tender market share. I want to use the X markets here. And this will give us a good idea of what we see on our tree maps. So this, I've actually based it off of our market share. And looking at a tree map here, tree map shows us our largest markets in the top left-hand side right here. And the percentage right here is the change from the day before. Since we update these markets daily, our volumes are updated and the percent change is from the day before. And right here below it, since I'm using the actual tender market share, how we divide it up from the national markets, Atlanta has the largest inbound market share with 4.1%. So here's the change, and this is the actual number. As you move across these markets to the right and down, our smallest markets are available here in the bottom right-hand corner. So you can look at the markets and see which ones. We were looking at outbound earlier, which is where the freight is out of, and our inbound is where all the freight is going to. So 4.17% of the freight in the U.S. is being delivered into the Atlanta market. 3.94% is being delivered into the Ontario, California market, and 2.9% being delivered into the Houston market. The shades of purple here are the neutral markets. If you see them listed in green, that means they're increasing. And if you see them in red and you see a negative 1.1%, that's because their market share is declining. So we have inbound volumes, we have outbound volumes. We can also flip this over and look at it in terms of a market share percentage. And that leads us into our next real big index that we use. And it is called, actually, before we get to that, let's go to a chart. We also use a chart here. And if you're going to build a chart, let's back up so I don't speed up and get away from us. You go to the blue plus sign and drop down and click on chart. It'll bring you up a SONAR chart. It'll be blank. The tickers that we use, which you will learn over time, if you go to our knowledge center again and categories by indices and go into our volume section and read up on the volumes, tender volumes, you will see our indices are listed throughout our reading. We're going to use the example OTVI.ATL. This is outbound tender volumes and the period, and then our granularity is Atlanta. We have the national, we have regional, and of course we have down to the actual markets. So if you get confused and do not remember what indice to type in, go to your knowledge center and you'll find it in your knowledge center. So I am going to use OTVI, and actually I want to use the New Orleans market, MSY. We use airport codes. So on your actual maps that we were looking at, you can hover over a market and it will let you know which airport codes we use. So here, when we pull up and using a chart, I love charts because they really explain the changes and the trends that's going on in a market. So here we're looking at volumes. It has a 81.37 index points, and that's a medium to smaller size markets. But we see what's going on here. We're looking at the market as through the last part of August, the markets were gaining strength and climbing, and we see a big dip here. Of course, that's the Labor Day holiday. Markets climb back up, but in New Orleans, they again drop back down. So we see the trends. And here over the past couple of weeks, we see where the markets have been climbing back up from below 70 points up to 81 points. And of course, that's what we want to see. The more outbound volumes that we see help tighten capacity up, and that will, in a sense, increase our capacities. We can compare the information in these charts. I want to look at ITVI, which is inbound tender volumes. When I'm comparing two different indices, I can leave them on absolute setting, which they're because they're the same type, or I can compare them on a dual set basis. Because these two are both volumes, I'm going to leave them on the absolute for just a few more minutes here. And what we see here that inbound volumes have been declining. So here you have outbound volumes increasing and the number of trucks in the market declining. That can really tighten up your capacity. Now, we measure capacity using what I'm getting to next, the Headhaul Index. The Headhaul Index for FreightWaves is the outbound freight volume minus the inbound freight volume. And our ticker for that is HAUL, HAUL dot, and of course, MSY for New Orleans. And we get 12.34 index points. I'm also going to pull up OTVI.MSY so we can see what's going on here. And I'm also going to compare it to ITVI.MSY. And since these are a little bit different, we have a lot higher numbers. I'm going to go ahead and change this over to a dual axis. On a dual axis over here, on our y-axis, we have the index points for the indices that we're comparing to. On the right-hand side, we have the y-axis, and this is the main indice that we have on top. So over here, this is my Headhaul Index, and these are the inbound and outbound volumes. Down here on the bottom, I have is our dates. So this is the starting here at the 1st of September is right here. So the last bit of August. I can zoom out a little bit, or I can simply go down here and pick 1 month, 3 month, and 6 month, year to date, 1 year, 5 year, and see all the information that we have. So here I actually want to keep it down to about a month. So I like looking at the trends that are going on in the markets, which really mainly over the last few weeks, we see our Headhaul index has been climbing. It's up to 12.34 points. It's a positive number. Therefore, we have more trucks leaving the market than we do. We have more loads in the market than we do trucks. Tight capacity pushes our rates up. We can also look at the Headhaul Index on a map, US map, just like we were using before. I'm going to go ahead and build another page, and I'm going to put US. I'm going to name it US Maps. I'm going to add another page. Here again, it comes up as a blank page. I'm going to click the blue button. I'm going to go down and choose Map. I'm going to pick the truck, turn my Chloroplast settings on, and I'm going to type in Headhaul Index. Now, the Headhaul Index is a little bit different on our maps because we have both blue and red colors. The red colors are markets that are negative. That means the Headhaul Index, that means there's more inbound volumes than outbound volumes. So therefore, you have a lot more trucks in the market than you do outbound loads. So very, very loose capacity. The markets that are here in white represent markets that are fairly neutral. When I turn my legend on here, you'll see the legend at the bottom of the page. And you'll see as the shades of dark red gets darker, that the higher the loose capacity is. So here in Phoenix, Arizona, we have negative 103, meaning we have a lot more inbound trucks than we do outbound loads. Markets in white are neutral. And then, of course, when we go to a positive number, more loads than trucks, we start getting shades of blue. The darker the shade of blue, the more outbound loads there are than trucks. Therefore, you have a lot tighter capacity. Now, when looking at capacity, it's always important to look on this map and always look at the surrounding markets. We do not measure deadhead when we use just our outbound minus our inbound. So you got to kind of look at this and understand what's going on in the surrounding markets. We all know that Southern California, it shows as a very, very tight capacity because there's a lot more outbound loads than inbound loads. Therefore, it's a darker shade of blue. But if you look at the surrounding markets, you see white, you see some reds, and you see Phoenix, Arizona. That's a very dark red, a negative 103. We have a positive 97 in Ontario, and we have a positive 101 in the LA market. So the surrounding markets, if you land your truck in these surrounding markets, understand people are going to deadhead their trucks to the areas where there's freight. We saw where there were high volumes in Southern California, and there is a big demand for trucks. That's why our capacity is showing tight. So they will be moving those trucks to that market. If you have a market that's a blue market that's surrounded by other blue markets, that means there's a lot of outbound loads in that area and fewer trucks. There's probably going to be markets that are, they're not going to be deadheading their trucks out of other markets because there's plenty of freight for them in those markets. So understand what's going on. And of course, capacity has a great deal of an effect on what goes on with our rates day to day. After Haul Index, we want to kind of look into our outbound tender rejection rates. Outbound tender rejection rates measure the willingness of drivers to pick up loads in a market, or for inbound, it measures the willingness of drivers to deliver loads into those markets. We look at the acceptance rates of drivers out of certain markets, and we measure it by really looking at the tender rejection rate. How many loads are being rejected? If we have a 3% tender rejection rate, 97% of the loads were accepted and 3% were rejected. We measure a carrier's willingness by seeing their tender rejection rate. By doing this, it correlates very close with what is going on in the spot market. And the reason that is the number one reason for rejecting a load is they can get a better load that's not a contracted rate on the spot market. When the spot market rates go above contracted rates, you will have carriers reject those loads, go to the spot market, and book a better paying load. So what I want to do here actually is go to our charts, and I want to show you outbound tender rejection rates on a US level, and I want to compare that to one of our rating tools, and we use DAT here. I'm going to bring up the average long haul rate that DAT shows across the US. Let me go here and turn on our large fonts so I can see here a little bit better. This will increase the size of our numbers and the line on the graph. So I want to back out to about a year. Right through here, we started at April of last year. This is right in the middle of where produce season started to take off. So everybody remembers 2018. Here we go. The big blue line is our tender rejection rates. The purple line here, these are this is the DAT average spot market rate. So over here on the left-hand side, we see our US dollars, and we're comparing it to a percent. Tender rejection rates are measured in a percent. The DAT long haul average rate is measured by US dollars. There are some gaps in here, and the reason we see gaps in here is because we are comparing a percent to a dollar. But you see the ups and downs, they correlate very close. When spot market rates are climbing up, our tender rejection rates are climbing up. When spot market rates are going down, our tender rejection rates are going down. So we can gather from this that our average tender rejection rate correlates very closely with spot market rates relative to the contracted rates in those markets. Now, what's really important here is I want to zoom in here to the last few weeks. When you're using a rating tool gathers their information from a load that is already delivered. So you book the load, it picks up, it delivers, the driver sends all the paperwork in, the paperwork is input into your system at your carrier, and then it's sent out and this information is gathered. Beyond that, you have to get a proper sample size. So this takes a few days. Rating tools, and I'm not picking on anyone specifically, rating tools are about 7 to 10 days behind the actual market. Here we see the purple line is the information that we get from DAT on a daily basis. It's current to the 18th. So if you're actually pricing loads today, then you're getting the spot market rate that was on the 18th. And in the 7 to 10 day period, a lot can happen with the markets. They can get tight, they can get loose, and rates can go up and rates can go down. We've all had that point where we've priced a load, called up a shipper and said, I'll do it for $1,200. And they answer back really quick, yes, I'll take it. And it's that moment that you know that you really probably underpriced that load because they accepted it so quick. We want to prevent that. We want you to maximize your revenues. We want you to see when the markets are tightening up to be able to elevate your rates. And here we see our markets right here going down. If you're looking at a market that's declined and you're using the rating tool rate from the 18th, you might be overpricing your freight. So the first couple loads, you might rate them at what the rating tool says. Since rates have declined, you'll be overpricing it. And of course, you're having to lower your rate, and it might take you 3 or 4 loads to get down to the proper level. Well, we want to prevent you from pricing your freight. If you can't win freight, you can't make any money. So understand that's how kind of tender rejection rates work, and show us what is going on in the spot market. And we can break tender rejection rates down by dry van or reefer on a market level. And that's where you can really find a lot of value. You'll learn what is going on with spot rates outbound from a market level. So let's go over and look at it first on a US map. This will help tell us what's hot and what's not. I've brought our map up here, and I'm going to click on the truck symbol again. I'm going to scroll down. Our Core Plus settings are on, and I'm going to type in rejection, and I'm looking for outbound tender rejection rate. And let's just go type in outbound. Outbound tender markets. Outbound tender rejection rate index. Now, outbound tender rejection rate index, OTRI, this is all trailer types combined. So doesn't matter if it's dry van, reefer, or flatbed, all the tender rejection rates are combined. And we use down here our legend starts at a 0% all the way up to, since our highest market is 27%, we're up to 27.81%. As the market tender rejection rates get higher, the shades of blue turn a little bit darker. So starting off here, you see all the markets that are in white. Those are 0 to 5.56%. To kind of help understand what's going on with the tender rejection rates and the spot market rates, I say that 0 to 3% is an indication that your spot market rates are below contracted rates in that market. 3% to 7%, that means you're kind of right below, right at, or maybe just above your contracted rates in the market. Above 7% means that your spot market rates are climbing above the contracted rates. I get excited when they break about the 10% mark, because then we're getting to kind of an area where we can start upping our rates and making better margins and charging higher prices to shippers. If you're a shipper in this case, obviously you want tender rejection rates to stay low, and for obvious reasons. Low tender rejection rates means that those markets will have lower outbound carrier rates. We can break this map down after seeing what's going on. We see here markets that are warming up here in the Pacific Northwest. I know that we have a lot of potatoes. We have hops that are being harvested in this area. We see the West Coast is white. We know that the rates coming off the West Coast right now are fairly low. We see Arkansas up to the middle. There's a lot of reefer, a lot of poultry being shipped on reefer freight right through here. So tender rejection rates are elevated for that market. And of course, the Midwest is starting to heat up. And a few markets in New York have started to heat up. The Rochester market and the Buffalo market, which I wrote about today, and a few markets in the Southeast. But we can break this map down a little bit better. If I go in here to our settings and click on the search, I want to change it to van. I'm going to scroll down until I say van outbound tender rejection rate. Now this map is showing us the dry van only tender rejection rates. You can hover over your market. It tells you this is the Las Vegas market, airport code LAS, and the tender rejection rates are 6.94% in the Las Vegas market. So that pretty well tells us right now that it's right around the contracted rates, maybe just a little bit above, depending on how you priced it. Over here in the middle, we see a darker blue. This is Evansville, Indiana, 13.09% on the tender rejection rates, dry van tender rejection rates. This is a point where I would definitely dig in and look and see what's going on in this market. And we do that by taking this information to our charts. Whenever I'm looking at a chart, I actually just prefer to pull up the volumes first. So I'm going to pull up OTVI.EVV for Evansville. And I'm going to compare that to VOTRI, which is the dry van tender rejection rate index, EVV. And again, you'll learn these codes, the VOTRI and the OTRI. You'll learn these in our Knowledge Center. And so here I'm looking at the blue line as our volumes. We see over the past couple of weeks, they've dropped a little bit, nothing significant, dropped from about around 50 points down to 42. But we see here, this is the green line. This is our tender rejection rates. And if you remember, the DAT was showing about the 14th. So here we've seen from the point where we would get our information from our rating tool, this market has increased from around about a little bit over 9% up to 13%. So this is a very good example where I would probably take the information from my rating tool and up my rate just a little bit for outbound freight from the Evansville market. You can also break this down into just the reefer. We can show you a map on the reefer, but I'm going to bring this up right here. Reefer is ROTRI.EVV. Oh, I got to type it in, right? ROTRI. All right, so there are a few markets across the U.S. that if you pull up a ticker and it doesn't show up, reefer is one of the markets that we have. About 15 or 20 markets that we actually don't have enough information on to publish. So in this market, we actually do not have reefer. But let's bring up Memphis. OTVI.MEM. VOTRI.MEM. There's our drive and compare, ROTRI.MEM. So here looking at the Memphis market, again on the right is our index. We see where the outbound volumes have been pretty flat. But here in green, this is our reefer in green now. We see here over the past couple of weeks, it's slowly been climbing up. But look at the outbound tender rejection rate for the reefer. It's 42.48%. That is huge. So therefore, if I'm using a rating tool, I'm definitely going to be increasing my rates. They're going to be well over what the average contracting rate is. Back here around the 14th, they've increased a little bit. I'm going to be pushing my rates up for booking reefer freight out of the Memphis market. Here, looking at dry vans, it's been fairly flat. It's 5.49%. So we're right around that contracted rate. There's nothing spectacular going on to really kind of push the rates up for dry van loads out of the Memphis market. So this is what we look at to understand what's going on. And of course, we really want to kind of look at what's going on the past, 7 to 10 days. And that's where we look at the trends, the upward trends or the downward trends. Now, we can also break this down by lengths of haul. So I'm going to close down the reefer and the dry van. And these are all trailer types together. So I'm going to compare our outbound volumes, and I'm going to use COTRI.MEM for Memphis. These are the city loads, 0 to 100 miles. I'm going to look at SOTRI. These are our short haul loads. These are 100 miles to 250 miles. I'm going to look at MOTRI.MEM, which is our mid-haul loads. It's 251 miles to 450 miles. TOTRI. These are our tweener haul loads. These are 450 miles to 800 miles. And I'm going to look at LOTRI. These are our long haul loads. So here on the right, again, we have our index. This is the volume index, 170 index points. And over here on our right, we have our percentages. So local loads, 0%. They're all being accepted. And you'll see that quite common with the local loads. Any local market, you'll have kind of a set rate, 500, 550, up to $700 to deliver loads locally, depending on what market that you're working in. So a lot of those are just small carriers that deliver locally. They're most time always accepted. And you might see a few small percentage points. But looking up here through, you see short haul, they have a 4.27 tender rejection rate. Mid haul, 9.70 tender rejection rate. So here we see here are the mid haul lanes. These are some of the lanes that carriers are resisting to go and pick up. So this right here would push a rate up for an outbound load that delivers between 250 and 450 miles in Memphis. Our tweener haul is 7.78%. Now, I want to talk about tweener haul for just a second. Tweener haul is a good market indicator of how strong or weak a market is. And that's because loads that run from 450 miles to 800 miles, that's kind of a lane that underutilizes trucks. And the reason is they might run a day and a half and get there, but might have to wait 2 days before they deliver because of the timing and ELDs. So that being said, and seeing the underutilization on those lanes, carriers want to take loads out of the mid-haul, long haul, or even the short haul before they take loads out of the tweener haul lanes. They will only really take those because they have less options. So normally you'll see a tweener haul tender rejection rate 12, 14% in a healthy market. And the other tender rejection rates will be less than that. But here in Memphis, we saw where the actual drive-in tender rejection rate was around, I think, 5.5%. That means there's fewer options for drive-in carriers. And when we're looking at these tender rejection rates, this is drive-in, reefer, and flatbed all together. But out of a market, drive-in normally is about 75 to 80% of the freight already. So it weighs heavily on these percentages. So this would tell me that with only a 7.78 tender rejection rate, the optionality for carriers from the Memphis market is limited some. And they're having to take the tweener haul loads. So is Memphis a strong market? For drive-in, it's looking a little bit weaker. And of course, when we saw the tender rejection rates for reefer at 42%, we understand that reefer is very tight on capacity in this market. So always kind of look at your tweener haul loads and see what is going on with that specific lane. If it's 12, 14, 15%, that means carriers have a lot of options. If it's 5, 6, 7, 8%, or even lower, that means their options are getting a little bit limited. Here on the purple line, we have long haul, 3.19%. Carriers are very willing to run long haul loads. They want the miles. They like to enjoy the higher revenues because of the longer distances, and it carries a lot lower tender rejection rate. So here, out of the Memphis market, carriers are really preferring long haul loads. And of course, with a very low tender rejection rate, that's going to kind of push the rates down a little bit because it's a load that is wanted heavily by carriers. Now, looking into tender rejection rates, we can also look at tender rejection rates on the U.S. map, and we can also build a tree map. But I actually am going to kind of skip up, and I'm going to build a tree map looking at different types of lanes for different types from different markets. We do not have every lane because that would be obviously several thousand different lanes. But I'm going to go ahead and build a new page here right quick. Add a page. Lanes, very simple. I'm going to add a new page. It comes up blank. I'm going to go to the blue plus sign, and I'm going to go to tree map again. I'm going to put lane OTRI. I'm going to go to manage symbols. From here, I'm going to go to existing list. And I'm going to go to our default symbols. OTRI, outbound tender rejection rates, all origins. I'm going to select that one, and I'm going to put use symbol list. Submit it. Over here on the right-hand side, you will see the OTRI starting alphabetically. Allentown, Albuquerque, they're all listed out here. I'm going to go over to the far right, and I'm going to click Done. Brings me back here. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to click Save. Actually, let me back up here. I need to adjust this. I pulled it up for the U.S., which is not going to help us out here much. When I go back here, tree map, manage symbols. When we pull the list up, you can click all. Actually, what you probably really want to do is click a city that you're actually looking at, because this is going to give you lanes. If we choose Birmingham, we're going to go down here and find Memphis here for us. They're in alphabetical order by the state. There's Knoxville. Here's Memphis. And what we want to see here now is submit. And it's going to give you all the lanes outbound Memphis. And done. Scroll down here and choose save. So this is a better map. So what this shows us are tender rejection rates on some of the lanes out of the Memphis area. We've got Memphis to Columbus, Ohio. It has an 8.16 tender rejection rate. When we see the percentage here, that's the change from the day before. So it's increased 1.5%. It's shaded in green. Memphis to Madison, 0.9%. Hasn't moved very much. So we'll keep it a neutral color. But it's 7.96%. And you can look at all these lanes. Memphis to New York, It's gone down 1.5%. It has a 6.37 tender rejection rate. Now, this may not be the exact lane that you're running, but if you're running, Memphis to Joliet, but actually Joliet's on here. When you see the Memphis to Chicago, find you a market that's really close to your destination. And here you'll see it's a 6.20% tender rejection rate, and it's on trending downward. 4.9%. It's gone down from the day before. And this can kind of help you figure out what's going on with the Memphis market, whether it's going to Chicago, Fort Worth, Texas, McAllen, Texas, Laredo, Harrisburg, PA. You can find lanes that are similar and check out the tender rejection rates. And this might help you know what's going on if you have lanes that are similar. So a very, very good map to also know. Going back to our tender rejection rates, we also have inbound tender rejection rates. Now, inbound is very similar to your outbound. It's using the same information, except for outbound, we use the outbound market. What is being declined, loads that are picking up in that market. For inbound, we use the destination city. So here I'm going to type van again, except I'm going to look at the van inbound tender rejection rate. On the outbound markets, it measured a carrier's willingness to pick up a load in that market. Well, here it shows us the willingness of carriers to deliver into a market. So right here, looking into the Shreveport market, of course, we know we've had a lot of weather around here. It has a 16.18% tender rejection rate. And what that really means is a lot of drivers are resisting loads that are going into the Shreveport market. So you might have looked at your outbound tender rejection rate, but also check out your destinations. Check out capacity on your destination. See if it's tight or loose. See if they have a lot of volumes or no volumes. And also check out tender rejection rates. With a 16.18 tender rejection rate, that means a lot of drivers are not willing to go to the Shreveport market. And there might be good reason behind this. Over here, we have Columbia, South Carolina, 7.13% tender rejection rate. So it's a little bit elevated, but there's some resistance to go there, but not a lot. But you always want to check this out, and this will help you understand what's going on in the outbound market, because you always want to know for pricing, what loads do a carrier want. When you find the best loads for a carrier, you get the better rates and you get the best services. So that's our inbound tender rejection rates. Where do we start when we're looking at SONAR? I love these U.S. maps. I always like to start on the U.S. maps, and I look at volumes, I look at capacity, and I also check out tender rejection rates on both dry van and reefer. And that will give me an idea of what's going on, and then I dive into these markets using our charts that I've shown you. I will pick a market and look at, obviously, inbound and outbound volumes, our Headhaul Index, and then tender rejection rates to figure out where I want to be when it comes to pricing. Now, another good indice to look at, and I'm going to show you this on just a chart, and these are tender lead times. Tender lead time is the time between when you book a load and when the load actually picks up. So it's 4:15 on Wednesday. If I had a load picking up at 4:15 on Friday, and I just now book it, it will be a 2-day tender lead time. We've all had those loads where we've booked a load pickup on Friday. We know it's going to be a tough load picking up on Friday. Your manager comes to you and says, hey, look, book that load, today. Book it right now. Try to get it covered. If we wait till Thursday or Thursday afternoon or even Friday morning, we're going to pay a whole lot higher of a price. Well, what your manager is actually doing, they're extending their tender lead times. And shippers will expand their tender lead times when they start seeing carrier rates start to increase in their markets. So it's actually a good way to measure what is going on in a market. And here, if we look at tender lead times for MSY, which is New Orleans, we see here it was up to 3.0 days. And just to throw that into comparison, let's go TLT.USA. This is the average tender lead time for all the markets across the U.S. It is 2.46 days. And here, New Orleans is 3.0 days. It is trending downward, but their tender lead times are a little bit elevated. So that kind of draws some curiosity from me. We'll bring up OTVI.MSY. Let's look at their volumes again. Their volumes dip down there just a little bit. And their dry van tender rejection rates are climbing. So we don't pull any reefer information, but we do have dry van data. So they're the tender rejection rates show that at a 9.23% that their spot market has probably just crossed up. It's almost to 10% where I like to get excited. So their outbound rates are probably a little bit higher than their contracted rates in the New Orleans area. So you're going to be able to up your rates just a little bit because we're getting close to that 10%. When we go back and look at the tender lead time or the tender lead times, you can see they're elevated at 3.00 days, but they're also starting to trend downwards. So tomorrow would be really interesting for me to see, and definitely check out our tender rejection rates in New Orleans tomorrow. Are they going to continue to go down? Or are they going to start going back up because of what we see with our tender rejection rates? So at 3 days compared to the 2.5 days on the U.S., we know they're elevated. So this is one key indicator that we can look at when we look at tender lead times. You can compare these to the tender lead times in Memphis if you want to. Using SONAR, you can compare a lot of different indices and see if you want to compare tender lead times or even volumes between two different cities or rejection rates. There's the tender lead times in Memphis, TLT.MDT, which is Harrisburg, PA. You can see these are trending upwards. So when I see them starting to trend upwards, but they're only at 2.66 days. So they're starting to trend upwards a little bit. That means, that shippers are seeing a little bit of a price increase from their carriers. So they're saying, hey guys, push the loads out a little bit, book a little bit earlier, and try to get a better rate. And once those rates start to recede, you'll see the tender rejection rates start turning back down. And I like to see them around the U.S. average, which is about 2.5 days. Memphis is at 2.54 days. So they're right there around the average. So nothing extremely showing up here for the Memphis market on tender lead times. But always follow these and look at these, and always use more than one index to judge a market. You always want to look at volumes, tender rejection rates, and definitely tender lead times, and try to break it down by lane and, of course, drive in and reefer, and put all this information together to figure out what direction the market is going in. And, of course, you want to pull this up for your destination markets as well. It's very important that you know what's going on in the destination market, because loose markets or weak markets can cause prices to go up. And, of course, strong markets are going to be where carriers want to go, and they can actually push the price down. So knowing where carriers want to go and what's going on in the markets will allow you to help understand what you can do with your rate to push it up or push it down. Another area that I want to show you real quick that I also like getting started in, if you don't want to use the maps and you're kind of in a hurry, we can go back to our U.S. maps. And I'm going to close this map here. I'm going to hit the blue plus sign, and I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom, and we have most volatile markets. All these are selected. If you don't want to use all the markets, you can cut them off and use the markets that are the markets you only want to look at, but I like using all of them. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring up a list here. You've got your market, you've got your airport code, you got your market share, and here's our outbound tender volumes. Here's our outbound tender rejects. This is OTRI, so it's all trailer types together. This is our head haul volatility and the tender lead times. And if you scroll down through here, you'll see some boxes that have shades of red or shades of green. And we've shaded these showing that there's a big change that's happened in these markets. We use it based off of standard deviation. We take the average of what this index should be, and if it goes up or down about one standard deviation, we mark it a light shade of green. If it gets up around 2 standard deviations, we mark it as a darker shade of green to kind of quickly point out what markets are moving and by what index. And by using this, you can also compare it to your volumes and your tender rejection rates really, really quickly. So here we see in the head haul volatility, increased 16% up to 21.91 in the Grand Rapids, Michigan market, but we've seen tender rejection rates going down. Of course, Grand Rapids is having a huge effect from the GM strike. So is Cleveland. We've seen where we have decreases in head haul and decreases in uh, tender rejection rates. Toledo, Ohio has had a 13% decline in tender rejection rates, meaning the rates are going down. It's down to 3.23%. Minneapolis, Minnesota, they've had a 4% increase. Their tender rejection rates are up to 14.27%. And you see their head haul index has increased to 29.41. This could tighten capacity up in this market and keep rejection rates going up. So this might be a market that you want to click on the green box, and it's going to bring up your OTRI for MSP. I can kind of scoot it over some here, and you'll see here our tender rejection rates since the end of August have steadily been climbing. And here in the past week and a half, you've seen it really jump up to 14.27%. This shows us that market rates in that market are going in the upward direction. And it tells me to increase my rates because our rating tool, again, is 7 to 10 days old. So good information, quick information. I'll close this back out and look at our other markets. If you want to look at the Headhaul Index, you can click here on the Headhaul Index and scoot it over. And again, you see what direction the Headhaul Index here is going to be the blue line, or the outbound tender volumes, they're going to be your blue line. Your green line is your inbound. So you see inbound trending downward, which means you're having less trucks flow into the market, and you're having your outbound increase. So you're getting more loads, but you're getting less trucks, and that's pushing your capacity into a tighter situation. I always get nervous when I see less trucks going into a market because you have to have trucks to move loads. Use this information here, go on through. The markets that are in gray here does not mean they're not moving. It just means they haven't moved enough to get out of the range that we want to flag it. We wanted to set the range for a usable range that we knew the markets were moving. If we made it too low and every market shaded up red or green, then that made it kind of useless. So here we used 1 standard deviation to 2 standard deviations to really show what markets are moving quickly. And this is a move that is over a 1-week period. Detroit, Michigan, outbound tender rejection rates down 25% to 3.17%. They've had a huge decrease in outbound volumes as well. We can see here beside it, 38% down to 112 index points. Because nobody's running loads for GM out of those factories right now, we've lost a lot of volumes. Scrolling on down, you can see others where Pittsburgh, VA, this is a great one to look at. It's had a 12% increase in the Headhaul Index, but it's still -2. So we shaded it green because it has increased, but yet at a -2 means that there's still more inbound than outbound. But it has tightened up. It's still relatively loose, but it lets you know that that market has changed. And of course, we have all 135 markets. If you're a shipper, you might only be interested in 8, 10, 15 markets. As I said, you can go back in here and adjust it and take off. If you don't want the Allentown market, you don't want the Amarillo market, you can take off some of these markets, or you can take off all of them and go through and pick if you want, Atlanta, Birmingham, Buffalo, New York, and Columbia, South Carolina. Go back down and save it. And of course, they'll just give you those listings. So a quick review. We've gone through, we've looked at outbound and inbound volumes. Where's the freight at? Where is it going? That's what you learn with the outbound volumes. A lot of your big carriers want to go to markets where the freight is. So run your trucks to the blue when it comes to the volumes. That you have a higher probability of getting freight and keeping your trucks rolling. When these markets were tight, a lot of your large carriers were more interested in keeping their trucks rolling to keep drivers happy than they were the actual rate. Inbound volumes let you know where all the freight is going. Well, when you're looking at inbound volumes on a U.S. map, you'll notice that in the Northeast, you'll see a lot of those turn shades of blue. And that, again, is because the Northeast absorbs a lot of freight and doesn't have near the outbound. So you'll see that's where a lot of the freight's going. The Headhaul Index, capacity. Very important index. We measure it by taking the outbound minus the inbound. And looking at what's going on can tell us if there's more trucks leaving the market than coming in, or more trucks coming into the market than actually leaving. Of course, always look at the surrounding markets when looking at your head haul index to see if other trucks might be moving to your market from another market, an outside market. Reasons for moving over: if those markets are a lot weaker and you have a lot more volumes and you have a demand for trucks, they'll move their trucks over to get a better load or load quicker because they don't want to lay over and get out of that market. Tender rejection rates. Definitely go into your Knowledge Center and read up on the tender rejection rates. We've got outbound tender rejection rates that have all trailer types. We've got it broken down by dry van and reefer on a market level. We can look at different lanes on the distance of haul to understand, are they rejecting short hauls and taking the long hauls, or rejecting the mid hauls and taking the short hauls. Kind of help understand what's going on in those markets. We also have lane history for some of the tender rejection rates. You can pull those up on a map, and those correlate very closely with what's going on in the spot market. If you know what's going on in the spot market right now, you'll have a better understanding of what to do with your rating tool. Use your rating tool, use your sonar, and get closer to the rate that you need to be. We do not want you underbidding. We don't want you overbidding. So we want you to maximize your revenues. Tender lead times. Tender lead times is kind of a key indicator. When shippers start seeing carrier rates start increasing, they start expanding their tender lead times. And I always compare those to the U.S. average to understand what's going on. So if you see a tender lead time climbing up to 2.74, I look at the U.S. average and it's around 2.51. I can use that as a relation to say, hey, they're really increasing. The nation's staying fairly low or fairly flat. This market is seeing an increase. So therefore, I believe that the shippers are seeing higher rates from the carriers, causing them to push out their tender lead times. Or when you see tender lead times start contracting, coming in, that might mean that the rates are easing up, and that might be a sign of what's going to happen with tender rejection rates. Are they going to go up or go down? It looks like carriers are starting to see the prices start to recede a little bit. Use more than one index. You can't judge a market by only using one index. Use your U.S. maps to get a quick overview. Dive into your markets by using the charts. I love using the charts, and I bring up and I look at the volumes, and I always compare them with the tender rejection rates, and also look at the inbound and outbound volumes versus the head haul index. I always want to know what makes the head haul index change. Is it because there's more loads hitting the market, or is it because there's less trucks that are coming into the market? And it can make a big difference. So that's what we have for you today on Sonar 201 training. Join us tomorrow. We have Sonar 301 as well. Sonar 301 tomorrow is going to be TCA benchmarking indices. It's kind of, how do you compare to the big guys when it comes to things like your OR, your different indices that, kind of go through your balance sheet and your ledgers. What are they doing? What are their averages? And what are your averages? And you can bring all this information up in Sonar. What are their turnover rates? So good information. Zach Strickland will be teaching it, and definitely tune in tomorrow and listen to him. Sonar 301 will be taught a different each week by a different market expert, and we teach things such as the maritime will be in 2 weeks, and then we have rail indices and all these other different categories that you see through our Knowledge Center. Thank you for joining in, and we will see you next week.